When a 35-year-old African president steps into a room where the world's most powerful figures are deciding the fate of small nations, he doesn't come to beg. President Ibrahim Traoré arrived in Moscow to present a bold vision, a proposal that could transform all of Africa and reposition Russia's role on the global stage. And in the face of that unshakable confidence, Putin didn't just listen. He nodded at an unprecedented opportunity. This wasn't just a meeting between two heads of state. It was a moment when a small nation dared to negotiate as an equal with a superpower. A moment when dignity spoke, clearly, firmly, in a room where no one thought it could resonate. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Crystal chandeliers gleamed, reflecting off the majestic marble walls of Moscow's Kremlin. The air was thick with reverence and power. This was the place where world-shaping decisions were made, where great powers placed bets on the future. At the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, or a high-level summit on Russia-Africa relations, familiar faces from across the globe gathered. Tech billionaires with colossal fortunes, formidable oil executives, powerful national leaders, and seasoned diplomats. Each carried their own calculations, hoping to steer the flow of capital and political influence. Amid this solemn and splendid atmosphere, an unfamiliar name echoed, raising eyebrows: President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Surprise mixed with skepticism rippled through the crowd. Burkina Faso, a landlocked West African nation with a GDP of just 15 billion, what could it possibly contribute to a forum of this magnitude? In the minds of many Russian officials, and even President Vladimir Putin himself, Traoré's presence was likely just a diplomatic formality, a symbolic gesture to check a box in relations. Putin, with eyes sharp as a blade, had seen countless proposals, promises, and familiar presentations from around the world. But what they didn't realize was that, in that very moment, a silent storm was beginning to form. A shift was quietly taking shape from within. During lunch and breaks, while other leaders and businessmen hurriedly networked, exchanged business cards and forged fleeting connections, Traoré stood quietly. He didn't insert himself into lively conversations, didn't try to impress or seek out influences. He simply observed, his gaze calm yet piercing, as if seeing through every calculation. That remarkable composure, that calm, was astonishing, as if he was entirely at ease in his own skin, unfazed by the grandeur and haste of the environment around him. He seemed to be listening, not just with his ears, but with all his senses, absorbing every piece of information, every move from those around him. Traoré's difference stirred ripples. Whispers began to spread through the crowd. He's not even trying to network with anyone. What is he doing here? Does he even realize where he is? A golden opportunity to build connections, and he's standing alone. These questions weren't born of genuine curiosity, but carried ignorance, even condescension, toward a young leader from a nation deemed insignificant. They didn't realize that his calm and distinctiveness were a strategy, a silent declaration of his resolve and vision. After initial introductions, the conference's working session officially began. A series of speakers took the stage, each with meticulously prepared presentations. On the large screen, complex charts with green and red trend lines danced. Each presentation was delivered by polished global executives and leaders, with confident tones and decisive gestures. They spoke on every topic: massive renewable energy projects that could light up entire regions, breakthroughs in artificial intelligence promising to change how we live and work, lavish tourism development plans yielding massive profits, ambitious space exploration projects, and modern smart cities rising from deserts. Each speaker insisted their project was crucial, a golden opportunity for international collaboration, offering enormous returns for investors and strategic benefits for partners. They emphasized numbers, projected returns, jobs created, regional GDP impacts. All were proposals representing global trends, packaged in eloquent rhetoric and eye-catching graphics. Vladimir Putin listened to it all professionally. His expression remained serious and focused, a habit ingrained in an experienced leader. Occasionally, he posed strategic, incisive questions, cutting straight to the heart of feasibility or long-term benefits for Russia. His questions were met with respect and thorough responses, sometimes with a hint of nervousness under pressure. Yet, despite the diplomatic courtesy, Putin clearly made no meaningful commitments. His gaze remained scrutinizing, calculating, as if peeling back layers to find true value. As time passed, however, a sense of boredom and fatigue began to settle over the conference. Though presentations continued, Putin's attention waned. He maintained his stern expression, but his eyes started drifting to smaller details in the room, occasionally glancing out the window where the Kremlin's golden spires rose against the Moscow afternoon. Other delegates began checking their phones, soft whispers about evening plans and upcoming parties creeping in. The room's atmosphere grew cold and purely professional. Everyone was there to fulfill diplomatic and business formalities, playing by established rules, with no spark or surprise. In Putin's mind, thoughts cycled. Another grand project, another chance to invest somewhere far away. Where's the real benefit for Russia in all this? Is this just another waste of time, a performance with no concrete results? He had seen too much, heard too many promises, and pragmatism was deeply rooted in his nature. For Putin, a proposal needed feasibility, clear and tangible benefits for Russia, not just pretty numbers and charts. When the moderator announced the next speaker, his voice was slightly hoarse and lacked energy. Next, we will hear a presentation from President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. A polite but noticeably tepid round of applause followed. Some delegates even sighed in relief, seeing this as a sign that a break or the session's end was near. They exchanged we-know-what's-coming glances, viewing this as a mandatory ritual. With Africa, a leader from a small nation would speak about its issues, hoping for symbolic aid or investment. He was mentally prepared for another bland presentation, perhaps about a country's urgent needs, the necessity of humanitarian aid, or some basic development project. He expected nothing groundbreaking, nothing significantly different. Skepticism had become a sturdy shield, protecting him from empty promises and unrealistic visions. But what he couldn't anticipate was that the young man about to take the stage would say nothing like those before him and would shatter every preconceived mold. As the moderator finished, a half-hearted round of applause quickly faded, giving way to a heavy silence. Ibrahim Traoré stepped onto the stage. No laptop, no remote, no documents placed on the podium. Even more astonishing, no glossy PowerPoint slides appeared on the large screen behind him, something every previous speaker had deemed essential. He stood silently, alone on the stage, like a living statue, needing no technological aid to amplify his presence. Traoré looked directly into the eyes of the audience, his gaze sharp yet not aggressive, but deeply knowing. He scanned the rows, lingering slightly longer on Vladimir Putin. In that gaze, there was no fear or hesitation, but a direct connection, a silent invitation. The silence stretched to an uncomfortable length, forcing everyone to lean forward, trying to decipher this unusual behavior. No one dared cough, no one checked their phones. The entire room held its breath, waiting. Then he spoke, his voice warm but clear, resonating through the hall with minimal microphone amplification. "Mr. President, dear delegates, I have a question for you." He paused, his eyes still locked on Putin. "When you close your eyes and imagine the future, what do you see?" The simple yet weighty question caught Putin, a master of controlling every expression, off guard, prompting a raised eyebrow. A flash of surprise crossed his eyes. This isn't a typical investment pitch, Putin thought. It went beyond dry numbers and charts, touching a more philosophical chord, an invitation to reflect. His curiosity was fiercely ignited. Traoré didn't wait for an answer. He stepped away from the podium, moving closer to the front row, breaking the physical and psychological distance with the audience. "In the past few hours," he continued, his voice like a fresh breeze through the stifling room, "I've listened to brilliant minds discuss markets, profits, returns on investment, global trends, and groundbreaking technologies. All very impressive." He paused, his gaze sweeping across faces, as if seeking connection. But I've heard little about the one resource that truly creates wealth. I've heard little about human potential. A soft ripple of murmurs spread. Some frowned in confusion. They were there to talk about money, power, not abstract concepts like human potential. But Traore pressed on, his voice compelling, as if sharing a personal story rather than delivering a presentation. He slowly pulled a small, worn, dog-eared photo from his military uniform's pocket. "This is Musa," he said, holding the photo up slightly for all to see. Musa is a 10-year-old boy from Gango village, a remote place in Burkina Faso, deep in the Sahel. Musa's life, like millions of other African children, is tied to the rhythm of the sun. When the sun sets, darkness falls and his studies stop. Traore's voice softened, as if evoking a warm memory. "On one special night, not long ago, we installed the first solar panels in Musa's village. It was a small, modest project. But when the first electric light flickered on, illuminating his mud brick home, Musa didn't run off to play or jump with joy. He paused, his expression pensive. He just stood there, staring at the bulb, then turned to me, his eyes blazing with fierce hope. He said, 'Mr. President, now we can study after the sun sets. Now we can build something.' Absolute silence enveloped the hall. Coughs ceased. Whispers fell silent. Even Putin, who typically maintained an impassive demeanor, stopped fidgeting or glancing at his watch. His eyes were fully fixed on Traore, a focus few speakers could command. Musa's story touched a fundamental human chord, beyond cold economic calculations. It wasn't about entertainment or comfort, but about possibility, aspiration, the ability to shape one's future. Traore let the story sink in. Then he continued, his tone growing resolute, cutting to the core. "That photo, Musa's words, represent what I'm here to discuss with you. Not charity, not aid, not traditional development assistance." He emphasized each word, firmly rejecting the old model of relations. But partnership, true partnership, equal partnership, between nations with capital and nations with aspiration, between those with resources and those with untapped potential. He stepped toward the large screen, not to display a slide, but to touch it, as if sketching an idea in the air. "We are proposing a project that will not only transform Burkina Faso, but all of Africa. It is the Trans-Sahel Infrastructure Corridor." With each sentence, Traore painted a vivid picture of his project. Imagine a complex network of modern highways, high-speed railways, massive power lines, and advanced communication systems. Spanning 8,000 kilometers, it will connect 12 African nations from the Atlantic coast to the Red Sea. This isn't just a road or a power line, it's a new lifeline for our continent. This will be the largest infrastructure project in Africa's history, but most importantly, he emphasized, his eyes filled with pride, it wasn't designed by Western consultants or international organizations. It was designed by Africans, by our engineers and economists who dreamed and planned together based on our real needs. He paused, letting the project's scale and ambition sink in. The estimated cost for the first phase of this project, $800 million. He looked directly at Putin, a figure that may be smaller than what Russia spends on some of its other major projects. A subtle smile flickered across his lips, a gentle but weighty jab. Traore went on to outline the project's transformative impact. Imagine abundant West African produce transported quickly and efficiently to East African ports, opening new markets and reducing waste. Vast solar farms stretching across the Sahara Desert will not only power remote cities and villages, but also fuel emerging industrial hubs, boosting production and creating jobs. High-speed internet will connect African universities to global research networks, bridging the knowledge gap and empowering our youth. He spoke of a new era of commerce, knowledge and self-reliant development. Then Traore turned his resolute gaze to Vladimir Putin. This was the critical moment where he laid out the groundbreaking strategic benefits for Russia itself. "Mr. President," Traore said, his voice formal and direct, "this is why this matters to Russia in particular." He seemed to address Putin alone, sidelining the others. "This isn't just about Africa's development, it's about positioning your country, the Russian Federation, as a vital bridge between continents, a superpower not just through military might or resources, but through connection and creation." Every ton of goods moving through this corridor could pass through Russian ports or benefit from Russian technology and expertise. Every megawatt of energy generated could be enhanced by Russia's advanced renewable and nuclear technology. Every communication network built could be bolstered by Russian telecom and cybersecurity investments, yielding long-term financial and strategic benefits. Traore painted a picture where Russia wasn't just an investor, but an indispensable partner, integral to this monumental success. He looked straight into Putin's eyes, unflinching. We project that with Russia's involvement, trade between Russia and Africa could increase by 400% in the next decade. But beyond the numbers, Traore stressed, this will establish Russia not just as a regional power or energy supplier. It will establish Russia as a critical global connector, a nation that helped unite Africa with the rest of the world on terms of equality and mutual respect. A legacy that will be etched in history. Traore's words echoed through the room. He hadn't come to beg. He came to propose a partnership, a strategic opportunity, and a place in history. The room was utterly silent, only the sound of bated breath remaining. All eyes turned to Putin, awaiting the reaction of the Russian leader, who seemed wholly captivated by the strength and vision of the young man from Burkina Faso. After clearly outlining the vision of the Trans-Sahel infrastructure corridor and its extraordinary strategic benefits for Russia, Ibrahim Traoré slowly closed his tablet, placing it on the podium with finality. He stepped back from the microphone, leaving a small void, as if needing no technological aid to continue conveying his message. His confidence, suddenly, became his most powerful weapon, commanding the entire space and the minds of those watching. However, he said, his voice warm and clear, resonating through the breathless hall, I must be completely honest with you. He paused, his gaze sweeping across each face, as if ensuring everyone was ready for what he was about to say. I'm not here primarily to ask for your investment. A gentle wave of murmurs, not quite noise but a shift of energy and confusion spread across the room. Diplomats exchanged glances, businessmen furrowed their brows, unable to believe what they'd just heard. Not primarily seeking investment? Then what? Putin's razor-sharp gaze lit up with an intrigued glint. What is this? Might have flashed through his mind, laced with curiosity. Traoré let the unease settle, then continued, his tone formal and commanding. I'm here to offer you something far more valuable than a mere business opportunity. I'm here to offer you a place in history. He stood tall, shoulders broad, unflinching under the intense scrutiny fixed on him. Not a nation enriched by others' resources, he said, his eyes locking onto Putin again, as if speaking to him alone, but a nation that helps others enrich themselves with their own resources. Not a nation buying influence with money or force, but one building influence through genuine partnership and mutual respect. Traoré was sketching a new image of a superpower, one Putin would surely ponder. He wasn't just speaking about Burkina Faso, he was proposing a new model of international relations that Russia could lead. Then Traoré delivered his final assertion, a statement so bold it left the room breathless. The Trans-Sahel corridor will be built, ladies and gentlemen, with or without Russia's involvement. We will find resources, we will find partners, because our aspiration for progress is unstoppable. We don't need aid, we need partners. This bluntness was an electric shock. It didn't just reject the role of aid recipient, it directly challenged deeply ingrained views of dependency. Putin sat silent for a few seconds, his expression unreadable. The tension in the room peaked. All eyes were on him, awaiting a reaction. Would he bristle at this audacity? Would he dismiss such a bold proposal outright? Putin's silence stretched, making time seem to freeze. Then a slow, almost imperceptible smile crept across Putin's lips. He nodded slightly. Gradually, a subtle shift played out on his face, from habitual skepticism to curiosity, then surprise, and finally a deep admiration. Thoughts swirled in his mind. This man, he doesn't just have a vision, he has extraordinary courage. He doesn't beg, he challenges, he demands respect. Putin realized Traoré wasn't merely presenting an economic proposal. He was offering an entirely new philosophy of international relations, one not rooted in dependency, but in equality, mutual respect, and self-reliant ambition. There might have been a parallel between Traore and Russia's own historical resolve for self-reliance, a tacit understanding of the value of sovereignty and defiance against external pressures. Putin saw this as a unique opportunity for Russia to assert its position in a new, distinct way, unlike the West's traditional approach, not through force or imposition, but through equal collaboration and co-creation. Finally, Putin rose slowly, a rare gesture, signaling utmost respect for the man before him. Facing Traore, his voice low but clear, resonating through the hall with undeniable weight. "President Traore," Putin began, "over many years, I've heard thousands of investment pitches and diplomatic proposals from around the world. Most focus on what Russia can provide them, what Russia can do to solve their problems." He paused, his gaze fixed on Traore, full of admiration. "You are the first to focus on what Russia can become by partnering with you. You've shown us a new path, a new role on the global stage." Putin stepped toward Traore, striding confidently. "What we've just witnessed," he said, his voice firm and resolute, "is precisely the kind of thinking that will shape the next century of global development. President Traore isn't asking us to solve Africa's problems. He's invited us to join Africa's solutions as equal partners." The room held its breath as Putin announced his decision. "Therefore, the Russian Federation commits $500 million from our National Investment Fund to the first phase of the Trans-Sahel Infrastructure Corridor project." A murmur, then thunderous applause erupted, echoing through the room. This wasn't just a massive financial investment, it was a significant political and geopolitical statement. But Putin didn't stop there, his tone commanding. "And to solidify this strategic partnership, we will also establish a permanent African Partnership Office in Moscow. I respectfully invite President Ibrahim Traoré to serve as chairman of its advisory council." An unprecedented move, demonstrating absolute trust and peer recognition from a superpower to a young leader from a small nation. That moment entered history. As Putin announced his decision and invited Ibrahim Traoré to chair the advisory council, a palpable shockwave rippled through the conference room. Gasps were audible. Diplomats accustomed to control and scripted proceedings couldn't hide their astonishment. This wasn't just a massive financial commitment, it was a political and geopolitical declaration of unprecedented weight. A superpower had publicly recognized a small nation, not just as a partner, but had entrusted its leader with a pivotal role in shaping an entirely new relationship. Traoré simply nodded, a subtle but meaningful smile flickering across his lips. He stepped forward to shake Putin's hand, a handshake between two leaders that was more than protocol. It was a connection of two visions, two resolute wills. "President," Traoré said, his gaze steadfast, "this partnership will be remembered as the moment the Global South truly began collaborating instead of competing, and shaping its own destiny." Putin smiled, a genuine and meaningful smile, affirming their shared vision. The news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, international reporters at the press center received urgent alerts. Headlines flashed across tablets and phones worldwide. "Putin commits $500 to African infrastructure project led by Burkina Faso. Russia pivots strategy in Africa. From aid to partnership. Burkina Faso's young leader stuns Putin." African stock markets reacted instantly. Major indices in Johannesburg, Lagos, and Nairobi surged, reflecting investor optimism for a new era of self-reliant development. Social media exploded. Clips of Traoré's speech, especially his rejection of aid and call for partnership, went viral. Hashtags Traoré Revision and Africa Rising trended globally. Millions of young Africans across the continent erupted in excitement. This is what leadership looks like. Finally, someone speaks as an equal. Traoré showed the world who Africa really is. Comments like these flooded platforms, reflecting a burning desire for deserved recognition and respect. Reactions from other powers were no less intense. In Washington, D.C., foreign policy analysts scrambled to convene emergency meetings. Western media outlets rushed to dissect the geopolitical implications, expressing deep concern over Russia's growing influence in Africa and the challenge to the West's long-standing model of aid and dependency. They argued Russia was filling a power vacuum, but overlooked the distinct nature of this new partnership. Editorials warned of new colonialism's return, return, yet struggled to explain the appeal of Traoré's message. Meanwhile, in Beijing, Chinese media focused on the competitive angle, reassessing their Belt and Road strategy in Africa. Though China had invested heavily in the continent, its model often relied on loans and Chinese-led projects, potentially creating debt burdens. Traoré's equal partnership model, endorsed by Putin, posed a new challenge, forcing China to reconsider its approach to maintain its edge. In contrast, publications in the Middle East and some global South nations praised Russia's global leadership and the new collaborative model, free from Western imposition. They saw it as a new paradigm where nations could develop together, transcending traditional barriers. Beyond headlines and social media, the impact reached Africa's corridors of power. Within 48 hours of the historic meeting, presidents and prime ministers from across African nations contacted Moscow and Ouagadougou. These weren't just routine diplomatic congratulations, but serious, urgent requests. They wanted to understand this equal partnership model, to join the new cooperative framework. African leaders recognized an unprecedented opportunity to reshape their continent's position, to move from passive aid recipients to active architects of their future. That moment marked a profound shift, the dawn of a new era in international relations, where the voice of dignity and self-determination was rising. For him, a handshake in the Kremlin meant nothing if it didn't deliver tangible results to transform lives in Africa. Words are one thing, he often told his aides, action is everything. It was a constant reminder of his relentless focus on execution and outcomes. With unwavering resolve and Russia's robust support, Traoré's government moved with astonishing speed. Within weeks, the Trans-Sahel Infrastructure Corridor Coordination Office was established in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital. This wasn't a bloated bureaucracy, but a lean, efficient hub, uniting Burkina Faso's brightest minds with Russian technical advisors. The goal was clear and ambitious: make the entire corridor a reality within 5 years, with specific timelines and accountability for each phase. Within 3 months of the historic meeting, teams of Russian engineers and experts arrived in West Africa. They came not as overseers but as collaborators. Feasibility studies were conducted in close partnership with local engineers, ensuring plans aligned with local conditions and needs. Russia's top construction firms began bidding for contracts, but not monopolistically. Instead, they formed joint ventures with African construction companies, ensuring genuine knowledge and technology transfer, building local capacity. Russian banks also partnered with African financial institutions, boosting local finance and reducing reliance on external loans. The emphasis on equality and mutual benefit was the key differentiator of this partnership model. No hidden clauses, no potential debt traps, instead absolute transparency. Projects were designed to benefit not just Russia but to maximize sustainable development for African nations. Prioritizing local labor training, favoring African firms for subcontracts, and ensuring comprehensive technology transfer made this an unprecedented cooperative model. This model stood in stark contrast to the traditional dependency relationships Africa had endured for centuries. It wasn't like the old colonialism that plundered resources, nor the Cold War-era superpower loans that created political reliance. It also differed from some emerging economies models, where large projects often used foreign labor and offered little local technology transfer. This was a partnership between developing nations based on complementary strengths, not hierarchical dependency. The impact went beyond economics or infrastructure. It transformed how African youth viewed international relations. They no longer saw themselves as passive, waiting for aid or rescue from outside. Instead, they saw their continent as actively shaping its future, with a voice and role on the global stage. Ibrahim Traoré hadn't just built a physical corridor, he'd built a corridor of hope and pride, a path for limitless possibilities. 6 months after the historic Moscow meeting, no lavish groundbreaking ceremony took place in Burkina Faso. Instead, a modest but deeply meaningful event was held at the starting point of the Trans-Sahel Infrastructure Corridor. It brought together local community leaders, regional engineers, and workers directly involved in the monumental project. Ibrahim Traoré stood among them, not as a distant president but as one of them, a partner in the build. In his speech, he avoided grandiose political or economic rhetoric. "Today we're not just breaking ground on a road," he said, his voice firm and sincere. "We're breaking ground on a new model of how nations can work together, a model based on dignity, respect, and a shared vision." His words were simple, but carried the weight of an entire future. Just 1 year after that moment, the first results were clear and undeniable. The initial phase of the Trans-Sahel infrastructure corridor was not only ahead of schedule, but under budget, a testament to Traoré's government's efficient and transparent management. Along the new route, small businesses began to sprout, educational opportunities expanded in connected communities, and trade between Russia and Africa surged by 60%, far exceeding initial projections. Most importantly, African youth began seeing their continent through a new lens, not as a place needing rescue, but as one actively building its own future. Traoré, ever humble, often reminded, this partnership succeeds because it's rooted in truth, not flattery, in shared interests, not one-sided charity, and in respect, not pity. His story entered history as a testament to the power of bold vision, steadfast resolve, and uncompromising rejection of prejudice. Ibrahim Traoré's story in Moscow is a powerful lesson for life in the US today, where individuals and businesses constantly seek to stand out. Traoré, coming not to beg, but to propose equal partnership, demonstrated the power of authenticity and confidence. Amid a sea of Western suits, his traditional military uniform was not just a statement of identity, but an assertion of self-worth. In a society that values conformity, Traoré reminds us that confidence in your unique value can set you apart and make an impact, whether in a job interview, pitching a startup, or advancing a career. The story of Mossa and the Trans-Sahel corridor teaches the value of presenting solutions, not problems. Instead of dwelling on Burkina Faso's challenges, Traoré offered a concrete vision and detailed plan. In the American context, from boardrooms to social discussions, focusing on viable solutions rather than complaints makes you invaluable. Finally, the declaration, "We don't need aid, we need partners," is a sharp reminder of dignity and equality in all relationships. Whether negotiating business deals, networking, or in personal interactions, showing self-respect and seeking mutually beneficial, two-way relationships is key. Positioning yourself as a valuable partner, not a passive recipient, opens unexpected doors, just as Putin had to say yes to an unprecedented grand vision. Ibrahim Traoré's story is a vivid testament to the power of dignity and vision. If you believe extraordinary things can happen when we dare to break the mold, subscribe to the channel to join us in exploring more inspiring stories like this. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video.